Could you imagine a day that could change the course of a nation forever? Picture this, July 14th, 1789. France is at the brink of a revolution that would echo across continents and centuries. A monarchy draped in opulence sits at the top while the common people grapple with poverty and desperation. The disparity is stark, the tension palpable. Yet, it's more than just a tale of the haves and have-nots. So, what really ignited the spark of rebellion? An empire of extravagance versus a people in despair. Imagine a world of opulence and grandeur where the air is thick with the scent of rich perfumes and the clinking of champagne glasses. This was the world of the French monarchy and the aristocracy. Their days were filled with extravagant feasts, masquerade balls, and a never-ending display of power, wealth, and vanity. They lived in palaces that were marvels of architecture, adorned with gold and precious gems. Yet, just beyond the gilded walls of these palaces, a different story unfolded. The common people of France were grappling with unbearable hardships. The country was in the throes of an economic crisis. Famine was widespread, and the cost of bread, a staple food, had skyrocketed, putting it out of reach for many. The tax burden on the common people was crushing. Despite their meager earnings, they were expected to fill the royal coffers. The monarchy and aristocracy, on the other hand, enjoyed tax exemptions, further deepening the economic divide. The people were desperate and disillusioned. They were the backbone of the nation, the ones who toiled day in and day out, yet they were the ones who suffered the most. They yearned for a life of dignity and fairness, a stark contrast to the life of indulgence led by their rulers. The seeds of discontent had been sown. The stage was set for a revolution that would shake the very foundations of French society. The spark of rebellion had been ignited, and it was only a matter of time before it would engulf the entire nation. The winds of enlightenment were blowing. As the French people wrestled with the harsh realities of their lives, a new breed of philosophers were sowing the seeds of revolutionary thought. Thinkers such as Voltaire and Rousseau were challenging the status quo, asking questions that had never been asked before. Their words, filled with novel ideas and concepts, echoed through the salons and cafes, sparking heated discussions among the populace. These philosophers were the heralds of the Enlightenment, a period of intellectual ferment that championed reason, individualism, and freedom. They encouraged their contemporaries to question the world around them, to challenge authority, and to demand their rights. Concepts like liberty, equality, fraternity were not just lofty ideals. They became rallying cries for a people yearning for change. Voltaire, with his sharp wit and biting satire, exposed the corruption and hypocrisy of the ruling classes. He championed the cause of freedom of speech and religious tolerance. Rousseau, on the other hand, was the voice of the common man. He argued for a society based on equality, where every citizen had a say in the laws that governed them. These ideas were revolutionary, and they were infectious. The French people, long oppressed by the rigid social hierarchy and the despotic rule of the monarchy, found in these ideas a glimmer of hope. They began to question, to challenge, and to dream. The people had started to think, a kingdom on the brink. Now, we turn our attention to the financial crisis that pushed France towards the edge of the abyss. The French monarchy, in all its opulence, had a voracious appetite for extravagance, one that far exceeded its means. The coffers of the state were draining at an alarming rate, with gold and silver coins disappearing like sand through fingers. This financial predicament was not a sudden occurrence. It was a ticking time bomb, quietly counting down in the background of the French monarchy's grandeur. Years of costly wars, reckless spending, and an unjust tax system had plunged the kingdom into a chasm of debt. While the nobility and the clergy lived lives of luxury, exempt from taxes, the burden fell disproportionately on the common people, the Third Estate. Their backs were breaking under the weight of this financial injustice. The king and his advisors found themselves in a state of panic, scrambling for solutions. But the damage was done. The kingdom was teetering on the brink, its economy in shambles. Desperate attempts to reform the tax system only served to stoke the flames of discontent among the populace. The financial crisis was more than a mere economic downturn. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited the powder keg of revolution. The crisis had set the stage. The stage was set for a rebellion that would shake the very foundations of the French monarchy, changing the course of history forever. A gathering that would change everything. The year was 1789. France was a pressure cooker of discontent and resentment, and the Estates General was the stage for this drama. The Estates General, a legislative body, had not been summoned for over 150 years. But now, King Louis XVI, his kingdom on the brink of financial ruin, had no choice but to call upon them. This assembly was composed of three estates: the first estate, the clergy; the second estate, the nobility; and the third estate, the commoners. The commoners made up the majority of the population, but were significantly underrepresented. The tension was palpable. The third estate, feeling their voices stifled, decided to break away and form the National Assembly. In an act of defiance, members of the National Assembly found themselves locked out of their meeting place and relocated to a nearby tennis court. Here, they made a solemn pledge that would echo through the annals of history. The tennis court oath. They vowed not to separate until a constitution had been established for France. This was the first clear assertion of political authority by the Third Estate, a significant step towards the French Revolution. A vow had been taken. The tennis court oath was a clear signal that the commoners would no longer accept the political structure that favored the privileged. This was the spark that would ignite the flame of revolution. The fuse was lit. A powder keg of frustration and anger, fueled by years of economic hardship and social inequality, had finally ignited. The 14th of July, 1789, marked a pivotal moment in the French Revolution. The Bastille, a fortress in Paris, became the flashpoint. This was no ordinary fortress. The Bastille was a symbol of the absolute power and tyranny of the monarchy, a place where political prisoners were held without trial. Its storming was a clear message to the king. The people had had enough. The day began with a crowd gathering outside the Bastille. They sought to seize the weapons and gunpowder stored within its walls, a necessity for their burgeoning revolution. But as the crowd swelled, their mission evolved into something more symbolic. The Bastille had to fall. The confrontation was fierce. The defenders of the fortress were vastly outnumbered, but they fought back stubbornly, holding off the crowd for hours. But the people's resolve was unshakable. By the end of the day, the Bastille was in their hands. This was no small victory. It was a statement, a declaration. The people had defied their king and won. It was a show of power that shook the very foundations of the French monarchy and marked the beginning of the end for the old regime. The revolution had begun. Freedom had a dark side. As the French Revolution progressed, a chilling period known as the Reign of Terror took hold. From the summer of 1793 to the summer of the following year, France was gripped by a wave of radicalism and bloodshed. Revolutionary leaders, driven by a fervor for equality and a fear of counter-revolution, turned to drastic measures. The guillotine, a symbol of swift and impartial justice, became an instrument of fear and death. It severed the lives of many, from the highborn to the humble, in public squares across France. Riots and revolutionary tribunals further fueled the atmosphere of fear. The revolution, once a beacon of hope and change, had morphed into a regime of terror. In its quest for liberty and equality, the revolution had lost sight of fraternity, of humanity. And so the revolution had taken a dark turn. The birth of modern France. As the dust of revolution settled, the nation found itself forever transformed. The old order had been toppled, the monarchy dissolved, and in its place, a new power rose. Napoleon Bonaparte, a military genius and a child of the revolution, seized the reins of the nation. He ushered in a new era that bore the hallmarks of the revolution's ideals, yet bore his indelible mark. Napoleon's reign brought about significant changes. The Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal framework, was one of his most enduring legacies. It embodied many of the revolutionary principles: equality before the law, freedom of religion, and protection of property rights. It became a beacon of civil law, influencing legal systems around the world. The French Revolution, a crucible of change and upheaval, gave birth to modern France. But it begs the question, was it the price of progress? The answer remains in the eye of the beholder.